There comes a moment in your life when silence speaks louder than words, when walking away becomes the loudest scream of self-respect you'll ever make. Sometimes you don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You don't need to beg anyone to see your worth. Just walk away and watch the truth reveal itself. It's in your absence that people's masks fall off. It's when you stop showing up, stop answering, stop giving, that you finally see who was real and who was just there for what you gave. The pain of letting go, yes, it's real. But it's also the beginning of power. Because there is something divine, something deeply freeing about walking away from what doesn't value you, what drains you, what never clapped when you won. And when you walk away, don't look back, look up. Because that's when God starts showing you who was for you and who was sent just to test you. Walk away, and you'll stop wondering who loves you. You'll know. Not by their words, but by their silence, their distance, their indifference. And that truth, though painful, is the beginning of your healing. When you decide to pull back, when you go silent, when you stop calling, when you stop checking in, when you no longer explain yourself, beg for clarity, or fight to be understood, you begin to witness something powerful. You begin to see truth unfold in real time. That silence, that sacred, painful pause, it reveals everything. Not because you wanted to play games, not because you wanted to hurt anyone, but because you finally chose yourself. You chose peace over noise. And in that silence, you realize who misses your voice, who notices your absence, who cares enough to seek you, and who was only ever around because it was convenient. It's never the silence that hurts. It's what it uncovers. It's not the distance that wounds. It's the echo of indifference from those you thought would chase after you, but didn't. That's when you know. That's when your soul whispers, now you see, because silence, real silence, doesn't create problems. It exposes the ones that were already there, hiding behind fake smiles and polite conversations. And when you sit in that silence long enough, you start hearing the truth that some people were only there for the version of you they could use, not love. When you step back, you don't need to accuse. You don't need to argue, and you certainly don't need to explain why you walked away. Because silence is the final word. It's the kind of word that doesn't need punctuation, doesn't need emphasis. It just is. And when you stop showing up for people who never showed up for you, they either step in or they step away. But you don't chase. Not this time. Because now you understand people will treat you according to the standard you set. And when your standard becomes silence, it commands attention in a way words never could. The people who genuinely care, they feel it. They feel that pause in their spirit. They wonder where you went, what happened, why it shifted. They reach out. But those who are just spectators, those who are there to take, not build, they don't even flinch. Your absence becomes their relief. And that's your answer. That's the revelation. It stings at first, it cuts, but it clears the path, because you'd rather walk alone in truth than sit surrounded by deception and fake love. That silence becomes your shield, it becomes your filter, and it will never lie to you. There's a quiet power in choosing to say nothing, in not reacting, in not defending yourself to those already committed to misunderstanding you. The moment you decide to be still, to let people talk, to let them assume, and to simply walk away from the drama, you take control. Not over them, but over you. And in that control, you find strength. You start to breathe again. You begin to see clearly. Because when you're in constant noise, when you're always fixing, always pleasing, always explaining, you can't hear your own voice. But silence, it gives your soul a microphone. And it's in that stillness that God begins to show you people's hearts, not their words, their hearts. He shows you the friend who never checks in unless they need something. He shows you the partner who's only affectionate when they want forgiveness. He shows you the family member who only comes around when it's beneficial. These are truths you couldn't hear before because their sweet words drowned out their bitter intentions. But silence doesn't lie. It just waits. And as you wait, people reveal themselves through their inaction, through their absence, through their silence in response to yours. You begin to understand that the people who really matter will never be comfortable with your silence. They'll feel the shift. They'll sense the change because love pays attention. Loyalty listens. Real connections don't need a warning. They notice when something's off, when your energy withdraws. They don't wait for your breakdown to realize you've been carrying too much. But those who only consumed your light, they don't even blink. They go on as if you were never there. And that's what cuts the deepest. Not the silence itself, but how easily they adjusted to your absence. That's when you realize you were never truly seen. You were tolerated, not treasured. You were useful, not valued. And in that gut-wrenching awareness, you begin to heal. You stop blaming yourself for giving too much. You stop beating yourself up for caring so deeply. Instead, you start learning. You start observing. And you make peace with the truth that silence reveals more loyalty than words ever could. You don't need anyone to say, I'm here. You need someone to show up, especially when you've gone quiet. Sometimes we keep speaking, keep engaging, because deep down we're afraid of what silence might show us. We're afraid that the people we love won't notice if we stop talking, that the ones we care for won't chase us if we walk away. So we keep the noise going, keep the conversations alive, even when they're one-sided. But silence is not your enemy. It's your mirror. It shows you who's facing you and who's facing away. It's not a tactic. It's a truth serum. When you finally let go of the need to be understood and choose instead to understand yourself, you stop fearing silence. You welcome it, because it's better to sit in the quiet of your own company than to be surrounded by people who make you feel alone. You learn that the loudest lies are often wrapped in sweet words, but the truth comes in stillness. You begin to embrace your solitude, not as a punishment, but as a place of protection. You stop waiting for closure, and instead you find clarity. The very silence you once feared becomes your sanctuary, and in it you find the strength to stand alone, even when your heart still aches for what it hoped to find. There will be moments where your silence screams, where your decision to not respond, not engage, not chase will be the loudest decision you've ever made. It will echo through the lives of those who took your presence for granted. They won't hear your footsteps walking away, but they'll feel your absence like thunder. Because when you gave fully. When you loved completely. When you showed up with all of you. And now you're gone. No dramatic exits, no fireworks, just quiet. And that quiet will haunt those who never thought you'd leave. It will gnaw at their assumptions. It will challenge their comfort. And while they sit wondering what changed, you'll be healing. You'll be building. You'll be breathing in a peace you forgot you deserved. Not everyone will follow. Not everyone will ask why. And that's okay, because now you know the difference between those who are real and those who are simply around. You've outgrown the noise. You've outgrown the need for shallow presence. Your silence has separated the sincere from the seasonal. And that separation, though painful, is sacred. So now you move different. You speak less. You observe more. You don't rush to fix every broken connection or prove your worth to those who never valued it. Your silence has taught you patience. It's taught you that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Some were just passing by. And that's no longer your burden to carry. You're not bitter. You're not cold. You're just clear. Clear on what you bring. Clear on what you deserve. Clear on who's really there for you when the applause stops, when the lights dim, when you have nothing to offer but your raw, honest self. And if your silence made them disappear, good, because real ones don't walk away. They walk through the fire with you. They call you when they feel your spirit shift. They don't need an invitation to show love. They just show it. And that's what you're leaving space for now. Not the crowd, but the core. Not the many, but the meaningful. Your silence has stripped away the surface. Now all that's left is the truth. And you're ready to live in that. Fully, freely, unapologetically. You spend so much of your life trying to earn a seat at tables that didn't even deserve your presence. You twisted yourself into shapes just to fit, to belong, to be seen. You lowered your light, softened your truth, silenced your pain, all for the approval of people who were never qualified to validate your worth in the first place. And now that you've stepped back, now that you've finally taken a breath and looked at the mirror, you're beginning to realize something sacred. Your presence was always the gift, not their approval, not their applause, not their temporary attention. Your time, your loyalty, your love, your listening ear, those were the blessings they received and never truly appreciated. You weren't just another person passing through. You were the one who stayed, the one who gave, the one who tried when it was hard. And the moment you stopped looking outward for validation and turned that gaze inward, you saw what they couldn't. You saw the value that existed in your existence. Not because someone clapped for it, not because someone labeled it worthy, but because it was always there, regardless of who acknowledged it. Your presence was the prize. They just didn't know how to unwrap it. You walked into their lives like sunlight through a cracked window, unexpected, warm, and healing. You gave freely, not because they earned it, but because your heart was built that way. You showed up for people who never even knew how to show up for themselves. And when they overlooked you, when they minimized your efforts, when they acted like your loyalty was disposable, you didn't get bitter. You got quiet. You got distant. You started paying attention. And in that silence, in that sacred pause, you started to understand the truth. You had been looking for approval from people who were still learning how to love themselves. You kept trying to measure your worth with broken rulers. You gave all you had to people who couldn't recognize a good thing unless it shouted. But now, you're done begging for breadcrumbs. You're done proving your value to those who didn't even know what they were holding. Because your presence, your essence, your heart, that's the treasure. If they couldn't see it, that's not your loss. That's their limitation. You're no longer entertaining spaces that require you to shrink to be accepted. You know now, being in your company was the gift. Their inability to see that, that's their burden to carry, not yours. They didn't love you because they didn't know how to. They didn't understand you because they never tried to. And they didn't appreciate you because they never took the time to recognize your depth. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. And people don't like what mirrors show them, especially when they've spent years avoiding their own truth. So instead of cherishing you, they kept you at a distance. Instead of listening, they dismissed. Instead of holding space for your heart, they walked around it like it was an inconvenience. But even after all that, you still showed up. You still gave grace. You still stayed longer than you should have. Not because you were weak, but because you hoped. Because you saw potential. Because you believed that maybe, just maybe, they'd see you for who you really were, but they never did. And that's okay. Because their blindness doesn't define your brilliance. Their rejection doesn't rewrite your story. If anything, it reaffirms the power of your presence. Because even in the way you loved and left, you taught them something. You were a lesson in light. And when light walks away, the room remembers how bright it used to be. You used to think that their silence was a reflection of your inadequacy, that if they didn't reach out, if they didn't affirm you, if they didn't stay, then maybe you just weren't enough. But now you understand something much deeper. Their silence was a reflection of their inability to comprehend your value. You gave them something rare, something sacred, your consistency, your care, your presence. You were their calm in chaos, their anchor when the tides rose. But they mistook your steadiness for simplicity. They confused your humility with lack, and they only realized your worth in your absence. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. And now that you've pulled back, now that you've chosen peace over approval, you can finally hear your own voice again. The one that says, I was always the gift. Not because you're perfect, not because you're without flaw, but because your heart was real in a world full of performance. You didn't show up to impress, you showed up to care. And that is rare. That is precious. That is irreplaceable. So let them watch you walk away. Let them wonder, because your presence was never theirs to take for granted. It's strange, isn't it? How some people won't see your value until you stop giving, until you stop texting first, until you stop making excuses for their lack of effort. That's when it hits them, when the warmth is gone. When the light fades, when the laughter you brought is no longer echoing in their space, and suddenly they remember. But by then you've changed. You've grown. You've healed. You've realized that you were never asking for too much. You were just offering too much to the wrong ones. You mistook their comfort for connection, their convenience for commitment. But you've woken up now. And there's power in that awakening. Power in no longer chasing people who were never running toward you. Power in knowing that your presence wasn't ordinary, it was extraordinary. And just because they didn't applaud doesn't mean the performance wasn't brilliant. Some people simply don't know how to recognize grace when they see it. Some people only appreciate the flowers after they've been picked. But you're learning to bloom in your own garden now. And you'll never again let someone else's inability to see your worth make you question your own. You were the reason they smiled more, the reason they felt safe, the reason they believed in themselves, if only for a moment. And yet they made you feel like you were just another person passing through. But you weren't. You were the one who stayed up late listening. You were the one who remembered the little things. You were the one who showed up when no one else did. That wasn't ordinary. That was exceptional. But sometimes when you're exceptional every day, people start to treat you like you're expected, like you owe them that kind of heart, but you don't. Your kindness is not a currency. Your time is not a favor, and your presence is not something to be used and forgotten. You are not a pit stop. You are a destination. And if someone couldn't see that, if someone couldn't treat you like the blessing you are, then that's not a reason to question yourself. That's a reason to remove yourself. Because what you bring to the table is too full of love, too full of light, to be consumed by people who only show up when they're hungry. You are not a convenience. You are a contribution, a gift. So now you move differently. Not colder, not harder, just wiser. You know what you bring. You know what your energy does. You know the way your words heal and your presence changes a room. And you no longer waste that on people who see you as optional. You don't beg. You don't plead. You don't perform. You walk in your truth and let those who can't handle it walk out, because you're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. And real isn't always comfortable. Real doesn't always fit in, but it always lasts. You've learned to stop apologizing for taking up space. You've learned to stop needing applause to feel seen. You've learned that the right people don't need convincing, they just know. And if someone didn't know, that's okay, because now you do. You know what you bring. You know what you deserve, and you know that your presence was the gift. Not their praise, not their permission, just you as you are. And from this moment on, you'll never again forget it. Sometimes it's only when you step away that the truth steps forward. You see, when you're always available, always reaching out, always the one trying to maintain the bond, people get comfortable. They assume you'll always be there, that the line between you and them will never stretch or snap. But then you pull back, not out of spite, but out of peace, out of exhaustion, out of the simple need to see who's really holding the other end of the string. That's when it all becomes clear. Who checks in? Who notices the silence? Who genuinely cares? Distance doesn't create disconnection. It reveals whether the connection ever truly existed. It reveals intentions. It strips away the performance and brings the truth into the light. The ones who only showed up when you were within arm's reach, they fade. But the ones who care, really care, will walk the miles, send the message, call just to hear your voice. Distance shows you who's emotionally invested and who was just conveniently close. It's not about proximity, it's about presence. And when people choose you, even when you're not in sight, that's when you know the bond was real, not built on convenience, but on something deeper, something true. It's a hard lesson, but one that's needed. Sometimes you have to stop texting first. You have to stop being the one who always checks in, who always carries the weight of the relationship on your shoulders. You have to create that gap, that pause, that space where they have the chance to meet you halfway or not. And that silence, as heavy as it can be, tells you more than 1,000 words ever could. It tells you who's been walking with you and who's just been standing still, watching you do all the work. Distance pulls back the curtain on the roles people play in your life. It shows you the difference between presence and participation. Because being around isn't the same as being involved. And you learn that some people were just shadows, reflections of consistency that only lasted as long as you stayed close. But the ones who matter, the real ones, they don't need constant reminders. They don't forget you just because they don't see you every day. They feel your absence. They honor your silence. They reach out not because you asked them to, but because they want to. That's what distance teaches you. It teaches you that love, loyalty, and connection aren't proven by nearness. They're proven by effort. Sometimes the ones you thought were the closest vanish the fastest, and that hurts. Because you poured into them, you showed up for them, you made time and space in your heart for them, and when the distance came, whether intentional or accidental, they disappeared. No message, no effort, just silence. And that silence stings not because you're needy, but because it confirms what your gut always whispered. They were only there for the benefits of your presence, not the responsibility of a real connection. And it breaks something inside you, doesn't it? Because now you're forced to reevaluate memories, conversations, the very foundation of what you thought you had. But as painful as that is, it's also a gift. Distance forces the truth out into the open. It clears the fog of illusion. And while that truth might hurt, it's still healing. Because now you know. Now you see. Now you're not carrying the weight of one-sided bonds anymore. You're not misplacing your loyalty. You're not giving your energy to those who never earned it. You're free. Free to build with people who choose you in every season, not just when you're easy to reach. You start to notice the small things. Who celebrates your wins even when they're far away? Who checks in when you're unusually quiet? Who sends a message just to say they miss your energy, your laugh, your presence? These things matter more than we admit. Because anyone can be around when you're accessible, but only the invested stay close when closeness is inconvenient. Distance is the filter. It shakes off the surface level. It reveals who's real enough to reach through the miles, the silence, the waiting. And it's not always about physical space. Sometimes emotional distance speaks louder. You could be in the same room and still feel miles apart from someone who doesn't really see you. And on the flip side, you could be countries away and still feel connected to someone who never stops caring. That's the beauty of real connection. It doesn't fade with time or space. It endures, it deepens, it adapts, and it grows stronger in absence. The ones who truly love you will find ways to reach you, even if it's just a thought, a prayer, or a message across the void. Because distance doesn't separate souls that are truly aligned. It simply sharpens the contrast between those who care and those who only claimed to. You learn to stop begging for energy that isn't reciprocated. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing people who treat your presence like a convenience instead of a privilege. And once you create that distance, once you stop feeding dead connections, you're left with clarity. Sometimes that clarity hurts. You find out that people you thought would never fade are the first to forget. But sometimes that clarity heals. It reveals the hidden gems, the people who may not say much, but when they do, it hits your soul. The ones who may not be loud, but they are consistent. They don't need to be reminded of your worth because they've always seen it. They don't need proximity to show up. They just do. And that's when you realize the weight of real connection. It's not about daily updates. It's not about constant noise. It's about the quiet knowing, the silent loyalty, the effort that doesn't demand applause. When distance arrives, so does the truth. And while that truth might be a little lonelier, it's also purer, cleaner, more grounded. You'll never again mistake closeness for connection, because the ones who are truly yours don't need GPS to find their way back to your heart. It changes the way you move. You become more intentional, more guarded maybe, but not bitter, just aware. Aware of how you give, to whom you give, and why. You're no longer offering pieces of yourself to people who vanish the moment things aren't easy. You've learned to pay attention to patterns, not promises. Effort, not excuses. You no longer cling to the fantasy of what could be. You respond to what is. And the truth is, distance taught you who your people are, the ones who stayed, the ones who called, the ones who remembered. That's your tribe, that's your circle. And maybe it's smaller than you thought it'd be, but it's stronger, tighter, realer. Because when the noise faded and the room emptied, these are the souls who kept showing up. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because real connection isn't maintained by convenience. It's maintained by choice. You stopped chasing and started observing. You stopped begging and started receiving. And that shift, that transformation, is everything. You're finally aligned with truth, with depth, with love that doesn't need to be loud to be loyal. And now when someone walks into your life, you see them differently. You no longer judge the connection by the intensity of the beginning, but by the consistency over time. You no longer get swept up in charm. You wait for character to show up. Because you know now that distance will always come in some form. Life gets busy. People grow. Seasons shift. But what's meant for you doesn't evaporate. It doesn't fade just because you're not present every moment. What's real makes itself known. What's real finds a way. So you watch. You give space. You let time reveal. And when it does, you honor what you find. No more overextending. No more overcompensating. You're not afraid of distance anymore because it doesn't take away. It illuminates. It shows you who's willing to bridge the gap. Who's invested enough to keep the connection alive. And once you've seen that, once you've lived through the unveiling, you'll never again doubt your worth. You'll never again chase what's not chasing you. Because you understand now, distance doesn't destroy real connections. It simply exposes the ones that never were. Loyalty is such a powerful word, but so often it's misused and misunderstood. People are quick to call themselves loyal when the benefits are flowing, when the attention is constant, when they're receiving all they need from you. But that's not loyalty. That's convenience dressed up in pretty words. The true test of loyalty isn't found when you're giving, serving, or showing up. No, it's revealed when you're no longer available, when your presence isn't guaranteed, when you step back to see who still stands beside you, when you have nothing to offer but silence. That's when the masks fall. That's when the truth walks in. Because anyone can stick around when the room is full of warmth, laughter, and comfort. But when the temperature drops, when the energy shifts, when you're no longer pouring into everyone else, that's when real loyalty speaks. It's in the ones who don't disappear when the light fades. It's in the ones who stay when you have nothing left to give. So many people will praise you when you're useful, but only a few will remain when you're quiet, distant, or broken. And those few, those are the loyal ones. The ones you build with, the ones who prove themselves in your absence, not your abundance. It hurts though, realizing that the ones you thought were loyal were only there because of what they could gain from you. You start to replay conversations, gestures, promises, and you wonder how much of it was genuine, because the moment you went quiet, the moment you stopped giving, they disappeared like smoke in the wind. No calls, no messages, just space. And not the kind that heals, but the kind that confirms what your intuition was too kind to say out loud. You weren't loved for who you are, you were tolerated for what you could offer. That realization cuts deep. You remember all the times you showed up for them, stood by them, lifted them, and now that you need even a fraction of that energy back, it's gone. That's the part they don't talk about enough, the silence after generosity, the emptiness after effort. But that space, as painful as it is, becomes your clarity. It becomes your mirror. Because loyalty isn't just about words or history or shared moments. Loyalty is about consistency, about being there when it's no longer fun, no longer easy, when you're not the giver but the one in need. That's when you see it. That's when you finally know who's real. And there's a peace that comes once you stop chasing the illusion. Once you accept that absence is the truest test of someone's heart. Because the moment you stop pouring is the moment you start seeing. Some people are only there for the benefits. They've been feeding off your strength, your kindness, your light. But when that light dims, they scatter. And you realize they were never connected to your soul, only your service. But here's where the growth begins. You stop mistaking loyalty for presence. You start watching who checks in when you're not visible. You pay attention to who speaks your name when you're not around. Because real ones don't need a reminder. They don't need constant attention. They stay because they want to, not because of what you offer, but because of who you are. And that's where healing takes root, in that small circle, in that quiet knowing that even in your absence, your value doesn't disappear. It just gets clearer. The real ones prove their love not in the glow of your giving, but in the shadows of your silence. That's loyalty. Not the celebration when you arrive, but the remembrance when you walk away. It changes the way you love, too. Once you've been abandoned in your stillness, you become intentional in your giving. You stop overextending. You start measuring people by the consistency of their presence, not the volume of their praise. You stop handing out all access passes to your soul just because someone says the right words, because you've learned that talk is cheap and actions in your absence carry the real weight. Loyalty isn't a loud declaration, it's the quiet commitment that shows up without being asked. It's the friend who checks in when no one else does. It's the one who remembers your pain without needing a reminder. It's the one who stays close when you're emotionally distant. And from that understanding, you begin to protect your energy. You stop giving your best to those who couldn't even stay for your worst. You stop watering relationships that dried up the moment you stopped giving. You learn that love without loyalty is a performance, and you no longer have a stage for it. You want the real, the raw, the rare. And that kind of loyalty, it's never afraid of your silence. It embraces your absence. It honors your space and loves you through the distance. The more you grow, the more you realize that your withdrawal isn't punishment, it's revelation. You start creating emotional distance not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because you've come to understand that if someone needs your effort to prove their loyalty, then it was never loyalty to begin with. The right people don't vanish when you stop giving. They become louder, more intentional. They show you their heart, not in reaction to your gifts, but in the stillness of your pause. And that changes everything. You begin to notice that the ones who matter the most often say the least during the good times, but scream the loudest in your absence. They step up, they lean in, they remind you through action, not words, that love isn't earned by effort, it's revealed through time, through seasons, through storms. And while it may be painful to lose the ones who left when you needed them most, it's also empowering because now you're no longer fooled by the noise. You're tuned into the quiet loyalty, the type that doesn't leave when you're empty. The type that holds you down, not just when you're giving, but when you're just trying to breathe. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop bending, breaking, giving just to keep people close. You realize that if someone disappears when you're no longer useful, they were never loyal to you. They were loyal to their need of you. And once that need ended, so did the relationship. That truth might break your heart at first, but it will rebuild your boundaries. It will strengthen your soul because you now understand that real loyalty isn't based on your performance, rooted in your person. Who you are, not what you give. And with that awareness, your circle changes. It may shrink, but it deepens. You become more intentional with your energy, more selective with your access. You give from overflow, not obligation. Because loyalty must be mutual to be meaningful. You no longer accept half-hearted presence. You want people who show up even when there's nothing in it for them, who stay even when the room is quiet, who care even when you're not at your best. And that kind of loyalty, it can't be forced. It can only be revealed. And the only way to see it clearly is to stop giving and simply watch who stays. So now you walk different. You don't chase, you observe. You don't beg, you allow. You've learned that if your absence doesn't bother them, your presence never mattered. And that's okay. Because you're done pouring endlessly into people who only see you as a source. You're done proving yourself to those who should have already known your value. Your peace is now priority. Your energy is protected. You've been through enough to understand that loyalty is not loud, it's steady. It doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself when the giving stops, when the crowd leaves, when the phone is silent. And through it all, you found the few who stayed. The ones who made the effort, who showed up when you didn't ask, who reminded you that love is not proven in what someone says when you're giving, but in what they do when you're gone. And that's the kind of loyalty that heals, that restores, that holds you together when everything else falls apart. You've learned the hard way, but now you know. True loyalty stands not in your light, but in your shadow. Not when you're giving, but when you're gone. And that right there is the gift. Sometimes the strongest move you will ever make is the one where you quietly turn around and walk away. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with validation. It comes with weight. It comes with questions, self-doubt, and 1,000 what-ifs screaming in your head. But deep in your spirit, there's a whisper that says, this isn't right. This isn't for me. And even when your heart tries to convince you to stay, out of habit, out of fear, out of comfort, you know you're not built to survive in spaces that dishonor your soul. Walking away is not about giving up. It's about choosing yourself after all the times you chose others. It's about recognizing the silent exhaustion from trying to be enough in places where your worth was never truly seen. Wisdom doesn't always show up in grand decisions. It often shows up in that quiet, trembling moment where you say, I deserve better, and follow through. It takes strength to endure, yes, but it takes even more strength to let go of what's slowly killing your peace. So no, walking away isn't weakness. It's you stepping into alignment with your own truth. And that choice, that's where your healing begins. We live in a world that glorifies staying no matter what, staying loyal, staying committed, staying strong. But what about staying true to yourself? What about the weight of loyalty to people who break your spirit just because you fear being alone? There's a point where staying becomes more damaging than leaving. And that's the point where wisdom kicks in. You start to see the patterns, the way your needs are ignored, your voice silenced, your presence taken for granted. And you wonder, how did I get here? The answer is you stayed too long in a place your soul outgrew. That's not loyalty. That's self-abandonment. You kept shrinking to keep the peace, kept smiling to hide the hurt, kept giving just to feel seen. But wisdom doesn't allow that forever. It starts tugging at your heart, gently reminding you that you deserve spaces that feel like freedom, not obligation. That love shouldn't feel like emotional labor. That connection isn't supposed to be one-sided. Walking away then becomes your act of rebellion. It's not a retreat, it's a return. A return to who you were before you were convinced that suffering was strength. That's wisdom. That's power in its most honest form. It hurts though. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't. Walking away costs you something. Sometimes it costs you everything. The memories, the dreams, the version of you that believed it could work. You'll sit with the ache of detachment, the silence that follows goodbye, the temptation to turn back just to ease the pain. But if you turn back to the thing that broke you, you'll only delay the healing. Growth demands separation. Wisdom knows that. It doesn't mean you didn't love deeply. It doesn't mean you didn't try hard enough. It means you finally learned that love isn't supposed to hurt this much. That your peace is too high a price to pay for being accepted by people who only love the parts of you that served them. So yes, you will grieve. You will question your decision. But with time, you'll start to feel the shift, the clarity, the lightness. You'll notice how much space pain was taking up in your life. And you'll start filling that space with peace, with self-respect, with energy that flows instead of drains. That's when you'll realize you didn't walk away to escape. You walked away to breathe, to be whole again. People will misunderstand you. They'll call you selfish, cold, ungrateful, especially if your absence disrupts their comfort. But don't let their labels define your liberation. The same people who benefited from your silence will resent your voice. The same ones who ignored your needs will be shocked when you no longer cater to theirs. That's the irony of walking away. It exposes the truth. You'll see who genuinely cared and who was only attached to the version of you that never said no. You'll lose people, yes, but you'll find clarity. You'll find yourself. And in that process, you'll start building relationships that are rooted in mutual respect, not silent suffering. You'll find people who don't need to be convinced of your worth, who don't panic when you create boundaries, who meet you with the same energy you give. That's what walking away teaches you. It teaches you that you were never hard to love. You were just loving people who weren't ready, willing, or capable of loving you right. Wisdom comes when you realize you're not here to convince anyone. You're here to live in peace, even if that peace means being alone for a while. There's beauty in solitude. It doesn't feel like it at first, because we've been conditioned to equate solitude with loneliness. But there's a difference. Loneliness is what you feel when your soul is disconnected from itself. Solitude is what you embrace when you reconnect. Walking away gives you that chance to sit with yourself, to relearn your own rhythms, to hear your own voice without the noise of manipulation, expectation, or judgment. At first, the silence might scare you. You'll be tempted to fill it with distractions, with people, with noise. But if you stay still long enough, the silence becomes sacred. It becomes a place where wisdom speaks, where healing finds you, where your heart starts to feel safe again, and you realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. In solitude, you become your own sanctuary. You learn to validate your own worth, to protect your peace like it's your most valuable possession, because it is. That's the wisdom of walking away. It doesn't just remove the wrong things from your life, it creates space for the right ones to find you. And until they do, you hold yourself with the kind of love you've always given away. You begin to move differently, slower, softer, but with more attention. You no longer rush into spaces where your soul feels heavy. You no longer chase conversations that leave you drained. You no longer explain your boundaries to people who benefited from you having none. That's the evolution walking away brings. It refines you. It doesn't make you bitter, it makes you aware. Aware of how you've been loving from a place of survival, not self-worth. Aware of how much you've tolerated in the name of connection. And now you choose differently. You speak with more clarity. You love with more discernment. You give not out of obligation, but out of overflow. Because your cup is no longer leaking into broken spaces. You no longer feel the need to be everything to everyone. You've embraced the fact that being enough has nothing to do with how much you're needed, and everything to do with how much you respect your own energy. That's what wisdom looks like in real life. It's not loud, it's not always visible, but it guides every step you take away from chaos and toward calm. And that guidance, it's yours now. No one can take that from you. And the beautiful thing is life begins again, quietly, gently. After the dust settles, after the grief softens, after the tears dry, you begin to feel again, not just survive, but feel. Joy starts showing up in unexpected places. Peace becomes your baseline, not a luxury. You laugh again, genuinely. You breathe easier. You're no longer waiting for someone else to choose you because you already did. You chose yourself. That's what walking away really is. It's a declaration that your healing, your peace, your wholeness matters. And the wisdom you carry now, it came through fire, through heartbreak, through silence, through letting go of what you thought you couldn't live without, only to realize it was never meant to stay. You are not weak for leaving. You are brave for honoring your spirit when everything in you wanted to stay. You are wise for knowing that your story deserves more than pain. And as you walk forward, you carry that wisdom with you, not as baggage, but as armor. As a reminder that walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything real, everything worthy, everything aligned. And now you move forward, not with regret, but with reverence. There comes a point in your journey when holding on becomes more painful than letting go. And it's in that moment of quiet surrender that the soul begins to heal. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you gave up. It means you're finally accepting that some things, no matter how deeply you wish they'd stay, are not meant for you. The dreams you once fought for, the people you once bent for, the places you once stayed in longer than you should have, they taught you something. But when they start costing you your peace, your worth, and your truth, wisdom calls for release. Because you cannot receive what's meant for you while clinging to what's not. We often think letting go means losing, but in reality, it's choosing. Choosing yourself, choosing clarity, choosing the unknown with faith that something better is waiting. And that faith, even when it trembles, opens the door for transformation. There's a strange kind of strength in releasing what you thought you couldn't live without. You start to make space, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, for what aligns, what uplifts, what fits. That space is where growth lives. That space is where your next chapter begins. Letting go feels like standing on the edge of something invisible. It's terrifying, it's vulnerable, because you're leaving behind what's familiar, even if it hurt, even if it drained you. We find comfort in the chaos we know. We hold on to people who don't see us, jobs that stifle us, habits that numb us, all because the thought of emptiness scares us more than the pain of staying. But what we don't realize is that the very emptiness we fear is where the miracle happens. It's where clarity is born. When you finally lay down what's heavy, when you finally stop fighting for things that won't fight for you, you begin to breathe again. Slowly, deeply, like your lungs were made to carry peace, not pressure. And in that stillness, something beautiful begins to shift. You start to notice the light. You start to hear your own voice again. You begin to ask better questions. What do I need? Who am I becoming? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? That's the power of letting go. It doesn't leave you empty. It reveals the fullness you've been missing all along. It takes time to see it. The space letting go creates doesn't fill up overnight. At first, it might feel like loss. You might replay old conversations in your head, revisit old messages, and wrestle with the urge to return just to stop the ache. That's okay. It's part of the process. Healing isn't linear, but gradually you begin to recognize how much room you now have to dream new dreams, to meet new people, to rebuild your identity, not around pain, but you realize that what you thought was breaking you was actually breaking open something inside you. And in that space, the right energy begins to find you. You start attracting peace instead of chaos, growth instead of stagnation, connection instead of attachment. You begin to recognize what feels right in your body, what resonates in your spirit. That's how you know you're creating space for what's meant. It feels different. It doesn't demand. It doesn't drain. It flows. It supports. It reflects the healing you fought for. And though the past still knocks from time to time, you're no longer answering the door. You learn to trust the timing of your life. It's one of the most powerful lessons letting go teaches you. We think we have to force everything, control everything, hold tightly to make things work. But the truth is, what's truly meant for you will never require you to lose yourself to keep it. You won't have to beg for it. You won't have to constantly prove your worth. It'll feel like breathing, natural, effortless, safe. But you only discover that kind of peace when you first release what was built on struggle, fear, or conditional love. When you let go, you're not stepping into nothing. You're stepping into alignment. And yes, alignment can feel unfamiliar at first. It can feel too quiet, too calm. But that's only because you were used to confusion being your compass. Now, you're learning to follow peace. You're learning that stillness is not a void, it's an invitation. And the more you lean into that space, the more you start to see the beauty in not knowing, in simply being. You realize that what's meant for you won't miss you. Not when you're finally open to receiving it. It's not just about people either. Sometimes you have to let go of your own limiting beliefs. The ones that say you're not enough unless you're needed. The ones that say you have to earn love by sacrificing your joy. The ones that whisper that your dreams are too big, you're healing too slow, your worth too conditional. Those lies, they're weights. They keep you small. Letting go of them means rewriting the stories you've been living by. It means choosing truth over fear, even when that truth is uncomfortable. It means deciding that your value isn't tied to your productivity, your appearance, or how much pain you can endure. It's about choosing softness after years of being hard. It's about choosing hope after seasons of disappointment. And every time you choose that, every time you catch a thought that doesn't serve you and replace it with one that empowers you, you're clearing space. Space for love that doesn't hurt. Space for joy that isn't fleeting. Space for the life you were always meant to live. That's the quiet revolution letting go creates. It sets your soul free from the cage of false narratives. Some people won't understand your decision to let go. That's okay. Some will call it quitting. Some will say you changed. And you know what? They're right. You did change. You stopped abandoning yourself to make others comfortable. You stopped silencing your truth for the sake of keeping peace. You stopped chasing validation from those who could never truly see you. And yes, letting go might have looked like distance, like silence, like walking away. But what it really was coming home to yourself. You chose to stop participating in your own pain. You chose to stop feeding dead things and expecting life to grow from them. You chose to believe that something greater is out there waiting for you to be ready. And you're not afraid anymore. You're not afraid of being misunderstood. You're not afraid of the unknown because you've seen what staying in the wrong place does to your spirit. And you've tasted the freedom that comes from release. That freedom, that's not just a feeling. It's a new standard. And it'll carry you toward everything your heart has been quietly praying for. One day you'll look back and understand why certain things didn't work out, why certain people had to leave, why the road curved the way it did. And you'll be grateful not because the pain didn't matter, but because it made room for what does. You'll realize that what felt like a breakdown was actually a breakthrough. That the emptiness you feared was actually sacred ground. That every goodbye held a blessing. Every ending held the seed of something new. You'll see that the space created by letting go wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It was life removing what was never stable enough to hold the next version of you. And when what's truly meant for you arrives, it won't compete with your peace. It won't confuse your heart. It will align, affirm, and expand everything good within you. That's the beauty of letting go. It's not about loss. It's about making space. And in that space, your true life begins. Not the life you settled for, but the one you were destined to create. A life filled with love that nourishes, purpose that ignites, and a self that finally feels whole. So here you are, standing stronger, clearer, wiser. Everything you've walked through, everything you've released, it wasn't for nothing. It shaped you. It stripped away illusions. It taught you to stop begging for crumbs and start feeding your soul. You've learned that silence speaks louder than words, and distance doesn't create separation, it reveals truth. You've seen with your own eyes who stays when you have nothing to offer but yourself, and who disappears when your giving ends. That's not a tragedy, it's clarity. You're no longer questioning your worth based on who left. You're no longer shrinking to keep the wrong people close. You've realized that your presence is the real gift, not their approval, and you don't have to earn your place in anyone's life. The ones meant for you will recognize your spirit without you having to perform or explain. Letting go was never about weakness. It was wisdom, a sacred wisdom that told you you deserve peace. You deserve alignment. You deserve something real. It's not easy to walk away, not when your heart is loyal and your love is deep, but you did. And in doing so, you created space for growth, for healing, for divine redirection. What once felt like emptiness now feels like possibility. You're discovering that freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's lonely, but it's always necessary. Because only when you clear what doesn't serve you can the right people, the right purpose, and the right energy flow into your life. You've let go of illusions. You've detached from toxic patterns. You've stopped trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. And in the letting go, you found yourself. You found peace. You found power. You found purpose. Life isn't about clinging, it's about flowing. What's meant for you will feel like home, not chaos. It won't ask you to shrink. It won't confuse you. It will meet you with the same clarity you now carry within. Every broken chapter, every closed door, every goodbye you never saw coming, it all pointed you back to your truth. And that truth is unshakable now. You've learned how to stand alone. You've learned how to love without losing yourself. You've learned that walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming whole again. There's nothing weak about honoring your soul. There's nothing foolish about choosing peace. And there is no shame in outgrowing what no longer fits the vision of the person you're becoming. So keep going. Keep clearing space. Keep protecting your peace. The right people, the right moments, and the right purpose are already on their way to fill the room you've made in your life. Thank you for listening, for staying with me through this journey of the heart. May you never forget your worth. May you always choose yourself with grace. God bless you, and take care.